All right, guys. Thank everyone for tuning in. Today we got an interview with Doug Zartman. This interview is going to primarily focus on the pre-Halo era, which is before Bungie joined Microsoft. So a little bit about Doug before he chimes in. Doug came on to Bungie during the development of the first Marathon game and was involved with Bungie until Halo Combat Evolved. It was sometime during the development. I don't know exactly when. His primary role with Bungie was a PR director. Since then, he has worked for several companies, including Halo and Electronic Arts, with positions ranging from game designer to community manager to content specialist. Some of the more notable games he has worked on is Stubbs the Zombie, Disney Guilty Party, and Battlefield Mobile. Doug is also well known for his voices in various games, including the voice of Bob in Marathon. It seems likely his voice will also be in the new Marathon game that is in development. So do you got anything to add on to that impressive resume, Doug?
No, that's pretty much most of it. Worked on the Halo novels, and yeah, I mean, I've done quite a few things, but yeah, that's most of it.
Okay, let's just move on. So I met Doug on Discord because he's helping out with the Fourth Curtain podcast. So can you give the listeners a quick summary of what that is about and why they should tune into that?
Yeah. So Alex Seropian and Aaron Marroquin started a podcast called The Fourth Curtain, which is pretty easy to find, and the the content is basically them doing lengthy interviews of legendary video game developers. And they really are legends. I mean, some of the biggest folks in the industry, people who have made entire genres by themselves, and made some of the most innovative mechanics that we all, take for granted today.
Mm-hmm.
So our latest guest is Raph Koster, who made Ultima Online and Star Wars Galaxies, and is basically the world's leading expert on MMOs. Um, so yeah, these are really fun interviews. Really fun interviews because they're funny, they're informative, they're often very surprising. Because people who play video games sometimes forget to realize, that video games are made by people,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, people with all their complexities and frailties and things like that. So yeah, it's a weekly podcast, and we have a Discord, which is also pretty easy to find. It's linked on our website. So yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a video game developer, but I've definitely, even some of the things they talk about, you can apply to things outside video games and just kind of
Oh
fun to
yeah.
listen to them, like lots of life lessons
Oh yeah.
and it's fun just to see the in and outs. So, on the Fourth Curtain Discord, you have a little game called Codes, and apparently it's based on the Beast. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's inspired by the Beast. So the Beast was an alternate reality game. It's actually the first alternate reality game, um, where there's this fictional world, um, that tells a story. In the case of the Beast, it was the story of a murder. Um, and then there are all these puzzles mixed in that are delivered by the story, and players try to figure out the puzzles. So on the Beast, this was a promotional vehicle for the Spielberg film AI, um, and this launched. So it launched pretty much in conjunction with the film, and what alternate reality players call the trailhead, which is the entry point for the game. Um, on the official movie poster, um, it had all the normal credits, but mixed into the credits was a credit for sentient machine therapist Janine Sala.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and some eagle-eyed fan noticed this and Googled sentient machine therapist or Janine Sala or something, and he found JanineSala.com, which is a domain I had set up, and which was, the beginning of the whole mystery. So it was a post. I think it was like a blog, and Janine Sala was talking about how upset she was that her friend Evan Chan had been murdered, and that sets off this whole vast story. We we had planned for like 400 websites, and I think we made about 250, something
Oh
like that,
wow.
in the end. And I registered all of them, and
Mm-hmm.
in that process, I was the weak link. So our theory. Okay, so the idea of this came from Jordan Weissman, who founded FASA, um, and has done a number of things since. And Elon Lee, uh, who made the game Exploding Kittens more
Mm.
recently, um, was one of the main designers. And there were a bunch of other designers. I wasn't technically a designer; I was the webmaster, and so I registered all the domains. And at the beginning of this project, the theory was that if anyone finds out this is being done by Microsoft, it's gonna instantly not not be cool. So we had to hide our, hide who was making the game,
Mm-hmm.
and stay in the shadows. And so I registered these domains all over the
Mm-hmm.
world. I registered one in Romania, um, because it was part of a map puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
There was going to be a big W written on the globe. Um, and so I registered them in my real name, and then I transferred ownership to fictional characters. Um, and that worked fine in every country except Romania, where they had some rule about,
Mm-hmm.
uh, it, it was extra complicated and time consuming to transfer domains. And so eventually someone found this and like, oh my God, this is being done by Microsoft, and it was fine. It didn't, adversely affect the game at all. So yeah, so inspired by that, I'm doing a very much smaller version of that, uh, on the Fourth Curtain Discord in the Codes channel.
Yeah, so
And then
I won a keyboard which I haven't got yet. So
yes, so the weak link there is Alex is super busy, and he's the one who has the keyboards and has to
yeah,
ship them. So I ping him on the regular.
yeah. So which is fine. So but you guys should come in right now. We're stuck on a code that we could use your help with. So if you want to come help us out, join on in.
Yes.
So the so for those Bungie fans, which probably the people following the channel are, he did the Fourth Curtain podcast does have interviews with Marty O'Donnell, Christopher Barrett, and also is it Jamie Griesmer? I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name or not.
Yeah.
So go check those out and get some more info from some Bungie devs from back in the day too. So all right,
Yeah, and we have an episodes thread, on the Discord, for which is intended for discussion of the episodes. Um, so yeah.
okay, let's move on. So let's talk about some of the early Bungie days and what it was like working there. So to start off, can you tell us how you came on board with Bungie?
Yeah, I had quit my job, which was writing, um, press releases for the American Bar Foundation, which is basically the research arm of the ABA. Um, and I was looking in uh, the job section of the Chicago Reader, um, and found an ad for, a company that wanted an artist to help make kick-ass games for the Macintosh. And I had a Macintosh. I was a Mac gamer, and I had
Mm.
done some terrible, terrible black and white art on my black and white Mac. So I applied for it. And Alex said, "Well, no, you're not qualified. We need someone who's a good artist and works in color, and but we do need, customer support, and I could use some help, writing press releases." So I said, "Great." So I started off doing just tech support for Pathways into Darkness. Um, and I had a list Alex gave me of like the 10 most common questions, and then I played the whole game so I could, answer the others. But yeah, pretty quickly I became a full-time PR guy. Um, and was doing all the press outreach, all the
Mm.
there wasn't community management as such back in the day, but I was the de facto community manager. And we would meet the community, players of Pathways and Marathon, and Myth at conventions and at tournaments and stuff like that, and had a really great community, just a wonderful, wonderful community. Um, so yeah, did that for 6 years, from Marathon to the beginning of Halo, um, and until we were acquired by Microsoft.
Okay, very interesting. So next question: what was the Office 5 in early Bungie days? How did workload overlap between positions? What was the development workflow like? How did it change during your time there?
Yeah, it was, yeah, at the beginning it was very college dorm-esque, you know. People I was the weird one. I was the one who was used to having 9 to 5 jobs, and so I went home at, 6 at night. And the rest of them didn't. They stayed there all night. Maybe not all night, but they ate all their meals there, sitting cross-legged on the floor. Um, and they worked all the time. Matt Sell tells a story of he lived near Bungie one time, the Bungie's Pilsen office, and he had to go get something, at like 2 in the morning, and he went there, and Alex was there, and Alex was making business calls and like working. So they worked all the time. Um, uh, but yeah, the vibe was very, there was a lot of real, college level humor, a lot of dick jokes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that changed a bit when we hired our first woman, Pam Clear, um, to be our receptionist. We cleaned up our act pretty pretty quickly, although she was no shrinking violet herself. Um, and as we did hire more people, it did get more, you know, as we did have more layers of management and more diverse, uh, workforce. It did get more sort of corporate, I guess, for lack of a better word. At one point, we decided, we had all these T-shirts. Bungie made so many T-shirts to support all
Mm-hmm.
of our games that I sometimes joke that Bungie was a T-shirt company that happened to also make video games.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but eventually we did decide that we should have, like professional corporate looking shirts, and so, nice polos with just the word Bungie on it, and no talk of kicking ass or whatever. Um, but it stayed even after the acquisition. Bungie was a pretty loose place. Um, certainly compared to the rest of Microsoft, which is where I was. Um, so Bungie as a studio didn't need its own PR guy. Um, and so I interviewed with Microsoft PR, and I didn't like them, and they didn't like me, so it was real mutual. Um, but then I interviewed with the franchise development group, which was a group run by Jordan Weissman,
Mm-hmm.
um, which was tasked with turning Microsoft first-party uh, IPs into big franchises like Star Trek or Star Wars. Um, and so, in service of that, we licensed soundtracks, and we made novels, got novels written, and action figures and all kinds of merch. Um, so I did that for 4 years, and I still had a lot of contact with Bungie during that time. I worked on the first 4 Halo novels, and I was constantly going over to their studio. They were in another building, um, and seeing my old friends and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah, so
so
that
yeah.
that sounds good. Yeah. So for those who don't know, there's the Tuncer Denise has some homemade videos from the early Bungie days, which shows a little bit of the college humor he was talking about. Although it was
Yeah.
probably toned down since Tuncer had a camera, but Um,
Not much.
not
Not much.
much.
There's some embarrassing videos of me
Yeah.
out there.
So let's talk about a few of the individuals who worked at Bungie. If you want to learn about Alex Seropian, I'm leaving him out on purpose. So go watch the Curtain podcast to get more from Alex. But
Sure.
let's start off with Bungie. So what can you tell us about Bungie's co-founder Jason Jones? For those who are listening, he is still the CEO at Bungie today. Is he some sort of gifted super genius? What was his personality like, and how did you enjoy working with him?
Oh, it was great. Yeah, he's super smart. I don't know where the line of genius falls, but super. He was originally a CS major at University of Chicago, where he met Alex, and quickly realized that they had nothing to teach him. He was already beyond them, so he switched to classics, and he was a classics major, which accounts for there's a lot of classical stuff that turns up in Bungie games, whether it's Cortana and Durandal, the swords from the Song of Roland,
Mm,
or there's lots of Latin peppered all over Marathon and Myth, and probably Halo. I can't think of any specific Halo examples, but yeah, that's where a lot of the flavor, like there was a ton of flavor in the development of Myth,
mm,
where Jason was taking all these great quotes from Sun Tzu and from Tacitus and just all sorts of you know um, historical sources, and putting them all over whiteboards and everywhere, just to sort of inspire the rest of us with the flavor of the game. So yeah, he was great to work with. Very, very competitive, uh, but a good-humored person, very driven. Uh, so yeah, yeah, I'm I'm surprised we don't see, well, no, I'm not surprised we don't see more of him. He he avoided fame and publicity like the plague, unlike many other, developers of that
mm-hmm,
time. Um, so yeah, I started to say I'm surprised we don't see more of him, but actually I'm not.
mm-hmm.
Um, he's just in it to make the product. He doesn't care about becoming famous.
Yeah, there are almost no interviews out there about him, so that sounds
Yeah.
about right. You'd be lucky to get an interview with him.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about a little bit about Greg Kirkpatrick. I'm sure everyone wants to know about him. So for those who don't know, Greg Kirkpatrick was the main story writer for one of Bungie's early one of their big hits, Marathon. I'm sure almost everyone knows about this game because of their new extraction shooter in development that was announced, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago. For those who don't know, Marathon has one of the most interesting stories they can find in any game out there. So, what can you tell us about Greg Kirkpatrick, including his personality and what working along his side was like?
Greg, also a really great person, very, very good humored, very smart. Um, yeah, I just wonderful to work with. We noticed Greg had this um, tendency to use the number seven in texts in the game,
Mm-hmm.
and fans picked up on that and were like, "Hey, there's something going on with the number seven. It's oddly prevalent in texts." And so we sort of picked up on that, and the number seven became kind of a legendary thing in Bungie's studio lore. And so Greg was the kind of person who could like see something like that and pick up on it and sort of run with it. Um, but yeah, wonderful, wonderful guy to work with. Um, he made a really cool level called 5D Space, um, which is because a video game engine, only obeys the physics that you tell it to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, in the Marathon engine, if you had a hallway at one set of coordinates and another hallway at another set of coordinates that intersected it in what would be real life, but in the game engine, they wouldn't intersect unless you told it to. And so you could do these wild environments that like wrapped around on each other and didn't obey real laws. He made a lot of the coolest levels I think he made.
Yeah, he seemed like a big sci-fi nut from things I've read.
Yeah.
Is that about right? So. Okay.
Yep.
So another question about Greg. So in Pathways in Darkness, there's a quote about a dishwasher dropping on Greg Kirkpatrick's head. Do you know anything about this? Is this a joke?
That happened. Yeah.
It did happen?
No.
So can you tell us
really
about
happened. It? Yeah, he was moving in or out of a U of C dorm, and someone was lowering a dishwasher out of a window, and it fell, and it hit him in the head. And it didn't, it was a glancing blow. I guess he probably went to the hospital, but it wasn't bad. But yeah, that happened.
So let's talk a little bit about Robert McLeese. So Robert McLeese was an artist for Bungie during the development of Marathon 2 and later became a writer for Bungie. Well, he started there during Marathon 2. And so if his LinkedIn page is correct, he's still working at Bungie, and thus he is probably the only guy who worked on the old school Marathon that is also working on the new Marathon game, at least that we know of. So what can you tell us about Robert McLeese and your time working with him?
Sure. So I believe that LinkedIn page has not been updated because as far as I know, he stopped working for Bungie like a decade ago.
Oh, okay. All right then.
And his wife, Lorraine, does still work at Bungie as far as I know. Mm-hmm. And she worked she came on to Bungie, shortly before the Microsoft acquisition. But yeah, Rob's a wonderful guy. Rob had great mannerisms that we all copied. Like he had this way of slapping his hands together, the back of one hand into the palm of the other hand, to make a point, and we all just copied that and started doing that. And he had great turns of phrase that were really fun. So yeah, he's a wonderful artist. He made all the weapons for Halo, and he made all the weapons for Marathon, and he worked on various characters in Myth, and then he made all the weapons in Halo. So yeah, I have a story, kind of a funny story, which I remember quite differently than Lorraine. Lorraine has a completely different version of the story. But the way I remember it is I was working on the Halo action figures, and this was like 9 months after the first Halo had shipped, right? So it was already a big hit, lots of people playing it, working on the action figures. And I have the final Master Chief figure ready for approval. And so I've got to drive it over to Rob's house if he was home for some reason and get his approval before we can say, yes, start production. So I go over there, and Rob's looking at the Master Chief, and he's like, yeah, the armor looks great, the faceplate's great. He's looking at the Spanker rocket launcher, and he says, yeah, that dark green mechanism, on the receiver on the Spanker looks right. And I'm like, Rob, that's red. And he's like, what? He's like, what kind of idiot would make a battlefield weapon red? And I said, well, you did. And Rob is red-green colorblind. And so he colored the Spanker in the game, red, thinking it was dark green. And we all thought, wow, that looks really cool. Sure, thumbs up. So that's my version of how Rob found out that the spanker was red.
That's a pretty good story. Okay.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the different Bungie office locations? When did you guys move? What was moving between them like? What was the different working environments at each location?
Yeah. So I started in Pilsen, um, and we initially had just the one office that you see in videos of, early Bungie. Um, but then later we expanded. We bought uh, a big a big hall, like it was an auditorium, um, or it had been an auditorium, but it was this big space, and we got that for when we needed to expand. And then I don't remember exactly what prompted the move to Ontario, downtown Chicago. I mean, it was, you know, it Pilsen was kind of a sketchy neighborhood back at the time.
Mm.
Um, some of our employees had uh, potentially dangerous encounters while working late there. Um, so so I think there were a bunch of reasons to move to Ontario,
Mm.
to the near west side. Um, and yeah, that was a much swankier building. It had really nice restaurants all over the place. Um, in in Pilsen, we only really had uh, the one place for food, um, which was La Cocina, which had fantastic Mexican food, really,
Mm.
really good. So, um, but anything else, if you wanted Popeyes or whatever, you had to drive for it. So yeah, much better food options in Ontario, um, and a bigger space, uh, and multiple rooms the different development teams and also for the publishing team that I was on.
So, so I mean, I know it was before your time, but the Hyde Park Apartments, was that just someone that was living there, or did you actually rent out an apartment, or they actually rent
Yeah,
it?
no, it was somebody's apartment,
Oh, okay.
either Jason or Alex's.
Oh, okay, okay. So that's what that was. Okay, so
Yeah,
and then I'm sure Microsoft was pretty nice when you went there.
yeah, it was pretty nice. Yeah, Bungie had its own. I'm gonna say they had their own floor, although I'm not quite sure that's true. But it was a huge, huge space. And Marty had, a whole recording studio built. Uh, and and yeah, it was you had all the amenities at Microsoft, no doubt. They had um, really good cafeterias with lots of really good food.
Okay, so how did Bungie's relationship with the community change as Bungie grew? Do you miss being a smaller studio like you were back in the day?
I don't know. I mean, it's been so long since I've been part of Bungie that, yeah, no, I think even at the end, right before the acquisition, we had the same relationship with the community as we had
Mm-hmm.
when we were smaller. We had Claude Herrera running HBO .org. And we had a great relationship with him, and he was a buddy, and we talked all the time, and we saw him all the time at trade shows. And we had Miguel Chavez, another super fan who was also a very good friend. So yeah, I don't think it changed much, from the marathon days to the pre-Halo days. Um, you know, the web was maturing, and so Claude could make a really pretty nice, fan site, um, just because he had more options. Um, but no, not not that much change.
So who from your days back at Bungie do you still keep in touch with?
Oh, Matt, Matt Sell and I are close friends, and we're talking all the time. Um, I talk to Alan Turner from time to time. He's a professor at DePaul here in Chicago, and he will be uh, presumably um, a teacher of my son, who is at DePaul in the game dev
Mm.
um, uh, curriculum. So yeah, I talk to Alan from time to time. Who else? I wish I could reach Jim Ruiz uh, because I want to make him a character in our ARG on the Discord. I've got a really funny idea for a character he could play, and it's most funny if I actually use his real name, Jim Ruiz. But but in order to do that, I would have to get permission from him, and I am unable to find him. He has disappeared off of the internet, apparently. Um, so yeah, if anyone if anyone can contact uh, former Bungie employee Jim Ruiz, please let me know. Um, who else? Obviously Alex. Um, that's probably it.
Mark Bernal.
Oh yeah, Mark Bernal, of course,
Mm.
on the Discord.
Bernal. Okay, I need to start pronouncing his name right.
Yeah, yeah. And Tuncer's his last name is Deniz, just an
Denise.
FYI.
Oh,
Yeah.
I said Denise in so many videos now.
Oh yeah.
I've
I don't.
confused all my subscribers.
Yeah. He's got a game studio called Shifty Eye, which has some interesting projects.
So we're gonna move on. We're gonna talk a little bit about some of the different games that were made during Doug's time there. Well, basically before Halo, so some of them were a little bit before. So the first few games are Nope, Operation Desert Storm, Minotaur, Labyrinth of Creed, and Pathways into Darkness. And so all these games were made before Doug's time. You already mentioned that you did some stuff from Pathways into Darkness. But anyways, so
Yeah.
let's start with the first game.
So
Oh, go
I
ahead.
pronounce that Gnop. I think we all
Gnop.
pronounce it
Oh,
Gnop.
a
Yeah.
bunch. Oh, okay. Gnop. Okay, I did not
Yeah.
know that. Very interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so Operation Desert Storm. We're gonna start with that one. It was a very difficult game where you played as an M1 Abrams tank in the first Gulf War. So, have you played it and beat Operation Desert Storm?
I have played it. I don't think I ever beat it. Yeah, Alex made that by himself. Um, and it was the first. I mean, I don't I don't know if anyone paid for Gnop. Maybe someone did. Um, but yeah, it was the first, sort of real Bungie software um, title.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, on the basis, I don't know how much, um, you know, Minotaur was a game that Jason had made either by himself or maybe with one other guy, um, and would have, um, network sessions, multiplayer sessions in his dorm room. And Alex saw that and thought it was a really great game and was like, "Hey, why don't you, join me and we'll publish this and we'll, try to make some money." And so that's basically how Bungie started. I mean, Alex did start Bungie by himself and had a old school logo and stuff like that, but Bungie proper happened after Alex convinced Jason to join him and put out Minotaur. Minotaur did quite a bit better. Um, you know, and so my early days there, every once in a while we'd get an order for Minotaur and I would sort of hand copy the discs from a master image, and then I would get one of the boxes and I'd fold up the box and put all the paperwork in there with the discs, and then I would use our shrink wrapping machine to shrink wrap it and mail it out. Um, so that was before we had actual fulfillment, centers and could actually support software at scale. Um, but yeah, so no, I don't think I ever finished ODS. I did play Minotaur a couple of times, but I never really got a sense of it as a game. It was more things I heard about.
Right. All right, so you already mentioned that you beat Pathways in Darkness. So Pathways, for those who don't know, it was a first-person shooter game with adventure and RPG elements, and it was the first game with a story. I mean, unless you count Operation Desert Storm having a story. I don't. Anyways,
Yeah.
um, so you already said you beat it. So what do you think of Pathways into Darkness? Is there anything interesting you can tell listeners that they might be unaware of about the game?
Not really. I wasn't there for development of Pathways. It was already a shipped product when I came in. So yeah, I played the whole thing.
Did you like it?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, totally. It was pretty advanced for me. Again, I had a Mac SE30,
Mm-hmm.
which was black and white, so I could only play Pathways on you know my machine at work. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I liked it a lot. I liked the RPG-ish elements of collecting stuff and having an inventory, and um, I thought the combat was pretty fun. Um, so yeah, it was a an interesting stepping stone toward marathon.
Yeah, I do remember back in the day, like when I was a kid, like any game with RPG elements, I thought it was super cool, right? Because there
Yeah,
wasn't nearly as many as there are today. So
right.
okay, so the next game was Marathon. So Marathon was Bungie's next big hit. It's really what put them on the board. Many listeners probably know about it because of the new Marathon extraction shooter that I mentioned. The simplest way to explain Marathon is that it was Doom on the Mac, but with a kick-ass story in space. It was
Hmm.
one of the first games ever with mouse look, which is very, very impressive. So, what can you tell us about the development for Marathon, and what do you think about when you look back at the game?
Oh boy. Yeah, the development of Marathon was pretty intense. We at at the August Macworld, we were thinking we were pretty close to shipping. Um, so, we were pre-selling Marathon at the Macworld, and we were telling everybody it'll be out in 2 weeks. And this is August, whatever, mid-August of '94. Um, and then getting back to the studio, and just going over going over the schedule and looking at what our actual plans were, we
Mm-hmm.
realized it was going to be a lot more than 2 weeks. Um, so yeah, it was very intense. Like I said, I I learned the map editor, I learned the tools, and I was making maps, although none of my maps shipped with for the first marathon. But, like I said before, I was going home and nobody else was. So they crunched. We didn't call it crunch back then, but yeah, they were pretty much 24/7. Uh, on finishing marathon, it finally shipped. Uh, I'm not sure when we got the Gold Master, but I remember on my birthday, December 22nd, the whole office went out to our fulfillment center in suburban Chicago, um, to help make boxes, just to get on the production line and actually, again, fold up the boxes, put in the registration stuff, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
put in the discs, um, just so we could have a few more copies of Marathon under people's trees on
Mm-hmm.
Christmas. Um, but yeah, it was pretty intense. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, none of my maps. So I did maps for that shipped in Marathon 2, um, a single player map called um, Ex Cathedra, and then I think two or three multiplayer maps. But then I didn't do any for Infinity. So I was doing a little design work at the time. Yeah, but was mostly on PR.
Oh, okay, thank you. So yeah, you were developing, getting your game development ready for later on in your career, huh?
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
How much did fans dissecting and speculating on the Marathon story influence the development of Marathon 2 and Marathon Infinity?
Um, hmm. Another another one I don't know.
Okay.
We definitely were talking with the fans all the time on IRC and on Apple. At one point had a, a platform called eWorld,
Hmm.
um, where you could walk around. You'd be a character and you'd walk around this little village and you could go to shops and buy things and you could go to forums and talk about stuff. And so we would meet the fans on eWorld and on IRC, CompuServe, um, and then eventually AOL came along, and we talked with people a lot on AOL. I I don't I don't know of any examples of fan things that made it into the game. Um, yeah, besides the seven thing, but that wasn't really a game thing. That was a studio thing.
Oh, so what do you think about the new Marathon game coming out? Do you think you will play it much?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So you're
Yeah,
excited.
I'm excited. And so, I messaged Chris Barrett on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, I'd really love to do voices for it." And he said, "Definitely." And so I am expecting to be in it in some capacity. I don't know if they're going to have civilians, Bobs, um, or not. I I don't have anything to go on other than him saying, "Yeah, you bet." And then he also said it in the episode uh, of the podcast a couple weeks ago. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna play it.
They better have some bobs.
Yeah, yeah. Someone on Reddit in the marathon subreddit said Doug Zartman does voices or we riot. And I was like, yeah,
He's not the only one.
yeah.
Okay, so can you tell us about the time Tom Cruise called, and have you had any? Do you have any similar stories to that one?
No, that's a pretty unique story. So this is during the development of Marathon Infinity was he was playing Marathon too. Anyway, this is like 98 or 99, and we've begun work on Halo, and Bungie West Studio is working on Oni, and Marathon Infinity is our most recent game. Um, and I'm at the office, about to go home, and Matt gets a call, and he puts it on hold, and he says, some knucklehead, claiming he's with Tom Cruise is stuck in Marathon 2. I think it was Marathon 2. Maybe it was Infinity. I guess it was probably Infinity. Um, and he said, I don't know how to help him. And so I said, okay, pass it over. And so I get on, and there's this British guy, uh, and he says, I'm here with Tom Cruise, and we're playing your game, and we're stuck. Um, and I'm like, all right. And he says, please call me back at this number, and he gives me a British number. So I call him back, and he puts it on speakerphone, and what's obviously Tom Cruise says, "Hey, Doug." He's got a very distinctive voice. It was like, oh my God, that's Tom Cruise. And he's like, Michelle, and the kids are in bed, and I'm on the set of Mission Impossible, the first one, um, and I'm playing Marathon Infinity, and I'm stuck. I don't know. I can't find the solution to this level. And so he described it to me, and I didn't know the answer. So I said, okay, well, let me call you back. I'm going to call the guy who made the level. And so I called Greg, who made the level, who was in New York at the time. And so it's like 2 in the morning. I mean, it must have been 8 a.m. or something in England, because it was like 2 in the morning in New York. And so Greg finally picks up. It rings and rings and rings. Finally picks up. I'm like, Greg, who's playing your level? And he needs help. Um, and so he gives me the answer. I call them back, um, give him the answer. And then Tom, my pal Tom, says, great, give us your name and address and we'll send you a Mission Impossible bomber jacket. And I said, I'm the PR guy, right? And so I said, well, that would be great, but what would really be great is if the next time you're on Letterman, and I'm about to say, you mention how much you like marathon, and the British guy picks up the phone and screams, "No endorsements!" and he slams the phone down. And so that's that story. I never got the jacket,
Sad. We're gonna
but
have to
I
find Tom
tried.
Cruise and get your jacket.
Yeah, yeah.
So during the development of Marathon, a couple of betas were leaked and or stolen. So what was going through Bungie's mind when these betas got into the wild?
Yeah, that sucked. So what happened was Alex took a machine with a marathon beta to a convention. It was a sales convention, to try to drum up sales, a retail convention. Um, and overnight, he locked the machine in a storage closet, and someone broke into the storage closet and got the beta off the machine and spread it around, and and people loved it, you know, and people were saying to us on the forums, you know, uh, why are you upset that people are playing this beta? It's great, we love it. And what I had to explain, um, I think I did it. I don't know where I did it. I had to explain that, we had the exclusive right to decide when software was ready for release. And, what could have happened was people would find bugs in it, that were terrible and would decide, oh, this game's not that cool, and would hurt the sales of the game, and so it was our exclusive right to decide when it was ready for release, and we didn't think it was ready for release. So, and people digested that, and we even got some apologies from people. But yeah, that was, it turned out it didn't have any adverse effect at all, but the possibility was there.
Yeah, and then there's a second leak that's in the Marathon scrapbook too.
Hmm. I don't remember that one.
You don't remember that one? Okay, so
No.
if you this might be interesting and give you a little kick, Doug. So on I don't remember what the name of the old net space was where you talk like the forum kind of thing, whatever it was.
Hmm.
But some of them are saved on Google Groups. If you look for like marathon leak betas, you can find some old messages. It's like I found some messages from you and Tunster Denise from
Hmm.
way back then, and so some of them still exist.
Hmm.
Anyways,
I'm surprised. Yeah, no, I didn't know that.
okay. So there is some jokes out there that the development of Marathon was slowed down because Bungie was having too much fun playing the net game. So how much time was really spent during the development playing the game together?
Uh, it was mostly an after hours thing. So again, it was mostly after I left.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't really know the answer to that. Yeah, I'm sure it was nightly. I doubt it actually made an impact on production because people were working all day, you know, and they had to test. I mean, they had to test new stuff that they put in. So yeah, I don't think it actually slowed down
Yeah,
production.
just a fun joke.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So last question: have you played any of the fan-made scenarios from Marathon, and did Bungie's staff end up playing very many of them?
I have not played. I've played Aleph 1, um, and but no, I haven't played any mods, and I don't know if any Bungie staff have. I would I would I would guess that the people making the new marathon have probably dipped into that a little just to see like what people are, you know, hoping for or looking for. That's just a guess.
So in the Marathon One manual, there's a section called Network Playtest Team. I'm guessing you are Tenderloin. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. The network name I've used since Marathon 2 has been Sirloin typically, but yeah, it might have been Tenderloin.
All right. So let's go on talk about Myth. So Myth was a tactical strategy game created by Bungie. It had a very impressive story, and there is, quite frankly, no game like it. Even, I guess we're getting close to 30 years later. It's truly a diamond in the rough, and it is really what got my YouTube channel going. There's still people who play it today. So, can you tell us about the idea for the story for Myth and how it was developed?
Yeah, so typically with any Bungie game, there was usually a book that Jason was reading, which was very influential uh, for the game. So for Myth, that book was The Black Company, which is an excellent series of fantasy novels, which have a very different take um, from the, sort of traditional high fantasy elves and stuff. Um, the Black Company was all about battlefield magic, and the wizards were all like kind of warriors, and they accompanied a band of mercenaries, which was the Black Company. Um, and so Jason was reading this, and it was very influential on Myth, and we all read it. Everyone on the team, typically read the book that the current game was sort of inspired by. Um, and so yeah, we early on in Myth development, we had to decide how the story would be delivered. And I very originally said, well, why don't we just do what the Black Company did and have there be an archivist or an analyst um, of the company who accompanies them and who the story comes from, and that's what we did. Um, so yeah, those story bits that are rolling out at the beginning of each level are coming from, as far as I know, unnamed uh, historian of uh, well, I guess there isn't really a
Mm.
company per se, um,
Hmm.
but historian of that time.
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of people in forums and stuff talking about how there's a lot of things inspired by the Black Company, but I don't think anyone at Bungie has officially said that before. So that's, I'm sure there'll be some fans that will enjoy hearing that.
Yeah, one of the first reviews, I think it was in CGW, Computer Gaming World, um, said, "Well, someone on the team's obviously a fan of the Black Company because, the parallels were direct enough that a reviewer who had not been told anything could see that." Um, so so
Okay,
yeah, I don't think they've ever officially acknowledged that, but
okay,
it's definitely there.
okay. So the big infamous enemy in Myth is called either the Trout or Tro. So I heard you came
Yeah,
up with this name. So you can tell us what is the correct pronunciation.
the only version I've heard is Trow. Um, yeah, I have seen instances of people, you know, fans or whatnot calling them Tro, but I've always called them Trow.
Okay. All
And
right.
I named all of them. I gave them all of their so so Jason in the design docs would, have a different naming scheme for each different kind of creature. And for the Trow, he just said irregular Latin verbs or something like that. And so I I got a Latin dictionary and I just made up a whole bunch of names for the Trow, which are in game.
Yeah, we did catch on in my Myth and Death playthrough that they were all Latin words. So,
Yeah.
um, okay. So the next question: I heard that the makers of the game Myth tried to sue Bungie because the name of the game was originally going to be Myth. Um, is this
Yeah.
true? Were were they
It
mad? Oh, sorry. You can go
No, no,
ahead.
it didn't get to the point of a suit. Their lawyer did send us a letter saying, "Hey, either either change your name or we'll have to sue you." Um, for confusion of product or whatever that term is. Um, and so, we liked the name Myth a lot, and we had logos made already. And so I said, to Alex, I believe, why don't we just add the Fallen Lords to the name, and maybe that'll be different enough. And the Rand brothers were cool with that, so that's what happened. So yeah, technically we were not supposed to ever refer to Myth as Myth. We were supposed to say Myth the Fallen Lords.
Do you think you guys stealing Marty O'Donnell had anything to do with that?
No. No.
Okay. So what can you tell us about your decision to include Fear and Loathing, which are the map making tools for Myth 2? And that, did you know that there's still a Myth community server, that is making Myth maps to this day?
I did not know that. That's cool. That's super cool. Yeah. Yeah, that spawned a whole bunch of really cool activity during the Myth days, like those mods that had shooting in them. Like there was a Civil War mod, which I never actually played, but then there was the Vietnam one, which I played a lot and thought was really good. Maybe it was called Green Berets,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we released it. We got permission from the mod makers to release a whole bunch of them in a pack, and I forget what that was called. But yeah, we were super impressed with the originality and the dedication of some of those mod makers. So yeah, that's super cool to hear that that's still an active scene.
Yeah. I mean, a separate. I can invite you to the Discord server if you want to talk to them. But
Sure.
Was there any plans by Bungie for Myth 3 or other add-ons similar to Chimera?
I don't think so. I think by the time, I mean, Jason got completely wrapped up in Halo, and was not likely to work on another Myth game. So no, I think we knew, Oni and Halo would be the future rather than another Myth.
Okay. All right. So what about Myth 3? Have you played it? What do you think about it? And did I have my in-depth videos. I shared those with you. But did you happen to check out my interview with Scott Campbell about the development of Myth 3 also?
Not yet, I don't believe.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I played a few hours of Myth 3, and I thought it was fine. It didn't. Um, yeah, I thought it was fine.
It didn't stick
Uh,
out. It was I
yeah,
think I think Myth 3, like if they polished it up a bit and it didn't come out so glitchy, it would have had a better
yeah,
reception. But I don't think it was ever going to be a hit like Myth the Fallen Lords or Myth 2 Soulblighter. So
yeah. We did license the Myth engine to another company who had a project called Daimyo, which was basically medieval Japanese, warfare using the Myth engine. Um, and that they made it through a few milestones, but that it was eventually clear that they were not going to finish. Um, and so we can't pulled the plug on that. But that was pretty cool for a while.
you said you pulled the plug. You mean they pulled the plug, or was Bungie somehow involved in that?
No, we stopped funding it when
Oh, you were funding it.
they
Oh, you
they,
were
they
paying
couldn't.
somebody to make it.
Um, how was I working? Um, I don't remember the exact arrangement, but they licensed the engine from us, but then yeah, we were paying them um, to help fund production. And at some point eventually we decided, no, this is never going to happen. So yeah, we stopped.
Yeah, that's too bad. Maybe there'd be more games like Myth today, but things
Yeah,
happen.
yeah.
S So what can you tell us
Games are
about?
hard.
Oh, it's a very
Games are
volatile
hard.
industry. Yeah, very
Oh
volatile.
yeah.
Um, so what can you tell us about the early versions of Halo that kind of played like Myth? And do you sometimes wish you could play a Halo game that was played similar
Oh
to
yeah,
Myth?
absolutely. I would love to play that. I never did play it. I saw it, you know, um, but it didn't ever get far enough that it was like passed around the office or whatever. So I never did play it, but I thought it looked super cool.
Okay, so what can you tell us about the outsourced cinematics from Myth, The Fallen Lords of Myth 2 Soulblighter?
Um, I thought they were cool. Uh, it was a Japanese company, um, whose background was, mostly anime. Um, but yeah, I thought they turned out really well.
Yeah, I think you used two different companies for each one because you like there was I think it was the first one was a little too cartoony or something like that, right?
Hmm. I don't know.
Okay, all right.
Don't recall.
Um, so when was the last time you played Myth? Are we gonna play together sometime?
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's funny. So on the Discord, um, I guess it was you. Someone mentioned that, there was a myth mod for Medieval 2 Total War. Um, and and I was like, oh, I'd love to play that. And so I reinstalled Medieval 2 and then just started playing that. So I still haven't gotten the myth mod for it yet because I'm a huge, huge Total War fan. I just think those are just fantastic games. And even though Medieval 2, is definitely dated and is showing its age, it's still a really fun game. So it is on my to-do list to go through the instructions for installing the myth mod. And I'm also afraid that I might have the wrong one because the mod was made for Medieval 2, um, the first expansion, and the version I got was the deluxe everything version. So I'm not even sure the mod will work, but I am gonna try installing that because that would be really cool.
Yeah, if Oni's listening, that's a good idea for a new game, by the way. I like Total War too. My I have a tough time keeping up with like modern War because they just have so many of
Hmm.
these DLCs that I feel like I'm never going to be any good or know what's going on.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
anyways,
So the next one is Pharaoh, and the guy, uh, either I don't know if he's a lead developer or he's a producer, is David Bowman. And he worked on Myth. Did he work on Myth?
yes,
He
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 did.
worked at
He did.
Bungie for years. Um, yeah, he definitely worked on Myth 2, and then he worked on the game following Myth, you know, um, which we called Phoenix. We called it a lot of different names, but but yeah, he worked on Phoenix, um, and and now he's you know a lead on Total War Pharaoh.
Yeah, so his
So that's cool.
David Bowman, I recognize his name. I believe his name was on one of the gravestones in that. It was at the lat. What was that level in Myth 2 Soulblighter? One of the first levels where
Oh,
you free Rurik from the cage.
yeah,
Yeah, if you know those
yeah,
gravestones I'm talking about. So,
yeah.
okay. So, do you have any thoughts on there being no way to buy Myth today? And does it bother you that Take Two hasn't done anything with it? Is there ever been any attempts that you know of to get the rights back?
No, no to that last question. Yeah, it bothers me. I hate when something cool, especially something cool that I've worked on, is unavailable. Um, but no, I'm not aware of any attempts to revive it
Okay,
anywhere.
next one. So, just a few questions about Oni. So Oni was Bungie's next big game that came out in 2001. I'm not as familiar with this one because it's just one I haven't dug into yet or played yet.
Hmm.
Although I plan to in the future. But Oni was an anime style action game. So what can you tell us about the development on Oni and the challenges the team at Bungie West faced along the way, if you know?
Yeah, I was because it was being developed by Bungie West. Um, I only had occasional glimpses of the day-to-day development. So I really can't say much about that. I was on a team of people at Bungie Chicago who had a weekly call with Bungie West, and we would just talk about development and the progress they were making and stuff like that. Um, and I still have my notebook of notes from that team. So somewhere I have a week by week uh, uh, archive of Oni's whole development. Um, but uh, but yeah, that I don't really know a lot about um, details of the development. The combat system was just amazing. The animations, and the really fluid, um, you know, movement from gunplay to, martial arts, and doing both at the same time was just a real accomplishment from Steve Abeta and others. But that was primarily his animations, as far as I know. Um, and yeah, it was really cool. It was really really neat. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, someone on the Discord, may have been you, posted an old. I was on an Oni press tour uh, with Rockstar, um, who were publishing it on the PS2. Um, and so yeah, we did this goofy segment for a magazine called Electric Playground, where I mimed doing Oni moves and then fell into a pool, pushed
Yeah.
into a pool.
Yeah, younger Doug could pull off the Oni moves.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know anything about the Oni's 2 development that never came to fruition by Angel Studios?
No, no, that was total news to me when I saw that video on our Discord.
Oh,
Yeah,
really? Interesting.
I knew nothing about that.
Okay, so I said not a whole lot. So there's a few unreleased game code names that we know of. You talked about Damio. I didn't know about that one. I didn't have that on the list. But
Yeah.
do you know anything about the game codenamed as Duality that was being made by Double Odd? Can you tell us anything about it?
Yeah, very little. I did see it. Greg and his company did bring it to a trade show, and I got a brief demo of it, and they were very excited about making um, making levels using splines, and I don't even really know what that means. But they had these like curving hallways and these really interesting interesting looking uh, prototype spaces, and it was going to be a shooter, but I really don't know anything else about it.
Yeah, I think a spline is when you have a line and then you like add a point and then it kind of like creates a curve around it. It doesn't necessarily
Yeah,
go through that point, but it creates a curve based
right,
off it. So he's talking about it basically be marathon, I guess, but not boxy, I guess
right.
maybe.
Yeah, that was my impression.
Okay, what can you tell us about the game codenamed as Phoenix? Was Phoenix originally going to be Myth 3 or
Well, so there were so many different ideas for what the Phoenix team should be working on that I don't know that any one of them was ever the idea, if that makes sense. We had lots of meetings talking about, you know, games that the Phoenix team could do that were something new and not myth.
mm-hmm.
Um, the idea. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think God, I remember so many. And this was this was during the period, which was a very difficult period for me, where uh, I had just had my first baby, and I was doing like midnight feedings and showing up to work exhausted. And then Halo was just starting to ramp up, and we were also doing a lot of press work on Oni. So this that period right before the acquisition of Halo was a very hazy uh, period for me.
Okay.
It was just a very confused and like everything like drinking from a fire hose kind of situation. Um, so no, I don't know that we ever landed on one idea that was the game Phoenix. Um, but I might be completely wrong about that.
Yeah, I think they got pulled onto Halo at some point, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So okay, so this one might be a real head scratcher, but in the scrapbook, there's a game mentioned that's codenamed Mosaic, um, and it says that Jason kind of was. Well, it says Jason was extremely reluctant to discuss it. Have you ever heard of it before? You know anything about it?
So is that the game that Jason was working on before starting Marathon?
Yes.
Does it imply that? Yeah,
Yes.
he was working on a game where you're in like a hovercraft kind of vehicle and you're skimming rapidly over the waves and there's lots of little hump-like islands and that was about all there was to that game. There wasn't even combat in it as far as I remember. I saw it a couple of times, and then they started working on Marathon, and that went away.
Okay. So, what is your favorite game pre Halo?
I mean, probably Myth, probably one of the Myths. I thought those games had so much atmosphere, uh, and were so evocative of a world, and they were really well developed worlds too. Um, that's not a knock on Marathon, but it was just there was a lot. Yeah, probably Myth.
Yeah, it's too bad. Too bad there's not another game like Myth. Maybe.
Yeah. So FizzG, whose real name I can't remember, um, was working on a game called Deadhold, which was going to be a modern resurrection of Myth, and he got pretty far. I was testing it, and yeah, he got pretty far, and I don't know what ended that project, but it did end.
Yeah, John God worked on that too. I could ask him. He was on the Project Magma team. So for
Oh,
Myth.
okay.
So can you tell us about how was Weekend Warrior and Abuse published by Bungie? How did that work out? Did you play either of these games? Did you beat them? What do you think of them?
Yeah. So right. So Alex, um, during, I guess it was during the development of Marathon 2, thought that maybe we should try being a publisher of other games, not just our own. Um, and so we had a friend, Brian Greenstone, who was making a game, which he called Pillow Fighter, uh, where uh, players are contestants on this goofy, non-violent game show where they beat each other up with pillows and non-lethal objects. Um, and so we signed a deal to publish that. Um, and I didn't really think the name, well, none of us really thought the name Pillow Fighter was great for an action game. Um, and so we changed it to Weekend Warrior. Um, with the idea that these are normal people who, on the weekend or whatever, go on this game show and have combat. Um, so yeah, it didn't it didn't light the world on fire. I don't know how really how successful it was, but it wasn't successful enough to merit more versions. And then Abuse had already been published for the PC, and we did the Mac version. Um, and that
Mm.
was fun. It was a fun little game. Um, I played it. I don't think I played the whole thing, but I certainly played enough to be able to talk about it to the press.
All
So
right.
yeah, that also I don't think did any, you know, impressive numbers.
Yeah, it's okay. All right, so before we end this interview, Doug, um, can you just say some of the famous lines from back in the day? So let's start off with "They're everywhere."
They're everywhere. The other thing is, now that I've talked for an hour, I'm actually kind of hoarse. But anyway, we'll give it a shot.
I think you sound great, Doug. You're doing fantastic. Okay, so what about Frog Blast Event Core?
Frog Blast Event Core.
Yeah, I hear a little bit of hoarseness, but still it's still good.
Yeah.
One of the guys jokingly asked about if you could make a burning Bob death scream, but I thought maybe if you could do that, that might be funny.
Yeah. Yeah. That's about as that's about the best we're gonna get from that. Uh,
I think part of it got cut out because you were a little too high.
yeah.
It's all
Yeah.
right. They'll love it.
Yeah.
So are there any other voice lines that you didn't get credit for, like any lines in Halo or anything that you want to claim credit for?
Oh yeah. Well, so I did two lines in Halo right after the tutorial. If the player is taking too long to get to the bridge, there are these two civilians who say, "Master Chief, don't you think you should get to the bridge?" And there's another line about a blast doors closing or something like that. Um, so I did those, um, and I did some voices. I did. We had professional voice actors for Stubbs the Zombie, um,
Hmm.
but I did some scratch audio voices that made it into the final game. A couple of cops in the police station. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Nothing on Myth, unfortunately.
Well, the everywhere they're everywhere was used in Myth. I mean, maybe you didn't have a session where you did it, but it was used.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Used-
yeah, yeah. No,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
definitely. I
yeah.
remember those sessions very well in Alex's office.
Oh,
In
oh,
fact,
okay.
I still have the script um, of
That's
of the
awesome.
different Bob lines,
What what
and
did what did Marty think of that?
I don't know. That's a great question. I have no idea.
All right, alrighty. Well, that's everything. Thanks so much for coming on, Doug.
Sure.
Is a huge blessing to the community, and yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for
Thanks for
having me.
joining
This was
on.
fun. See you, Starside.